Our final session of the day. I hope everyone's got a little bit of stamina left, because bring to the stage my colleague Yaz Khoury, who's the Director of Developer Relations and the other part of the co-op. We are the co-op. We're here. That's it. That is us. And Yaz is going to talk a little bit about that role.
Thank you, Bob. All right. I'm Yaz, or the last man standing between you and happy hour. My talk is developer relations in Ethereum Classic, or what I like to call what the hell I've been doing for the past year. I want to get more energy in the room. Is it okay if I take a selfie video with all of you and everyone yells out immutability? Yeah? Let's do it. All right. 1 sec. All right. Let's go. Immutability. Woo! All right, let's power through. So my talk is about DevRel, developer relation, as we call it in Ethereum Classic. Basically, what we're going to talk about here is what is DevRel and what are the challenges that we face in DevRel in crypto. And then we're going to talk about all the DevRel projects that we worked on at the ETC Cooperative. All right, so the main important question is, why are developers important? Rito Mayer, he's a Google developer advocate. He said that if you have a platform that is benefits from a lot of user adoption, then you want to provide products and services in order to retain those users. Now, how do you do that? You can provide an ecosystem where third-party developers can build those products and services, right? In his example, they're talking about Google, their APIs, their bunch of products and services. But when it comes to crypto and ETC specifically, third-party developers refers to smart contract and dApp developers. So what is developer relation? Does anyone heard of DevRel before? Show of hands, anybody? All right, we have a handful. So back in the 90s, tech companies tried to advocate for developers to use their services or their open source software. They would send marketing peeps over in order to advocate for developers. Now, developers have a high filter for BS. They know when somebody's trying to sell them something, and they know when somebody's not really technical. So what happened in the 90s was marketers couldn't even advocate anything for developers, and developers never trusted marketers. Lo and behold, developer relations was born. The idea was you want to send developers to advocate for other developers. Why? Because developers can get as technical as they can with other developers. The developer advocate and developer relation was born from that. So what are the things that we do in developer relations here? We try to build an awareness of the platform and developer communities. In our case, ETC as a development platform. We also want to create necessary tools and infrastructure for third-party developers to build their apps. We also, I file feature requests, bug reports, tickets on GitHub. I answer questions on Discord, Gitter, and Stack Overflow. We also write documentation, how-to guide when build demo apps. So the TLDR is, DevRel is the interface between the third-party developers and the product stakeholders, in this case, people who are stakeholders for ETC. Now, how do you quantify success in DevRel? The problem with DevRel is very hard to measure ROI, return on investment. Why? Because it's an open source software. And you don't measure about how many people clicked on your ad that takes them to your product page. We don't use that. It's a mixture of data signaled online and gut feeling. Like when you go to a community meetup and you try to figure out what kind of the sentiment of the community, what are the trends? Are people more into mixers? Are they more into Zach's Fly client? Or a lot of gut feelings involved. The most important online engagement metrics that we care about is how many people are mentioning your product on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. How many people are forking your GitHub repo, adding pull requests, writing issues, and how many people are posting, sharing it on Medium, commenting on it. And the other thing that we like to do is like in-person connection. And that's very hard to quantify, but it's equally important. Because, you know, as we said, we try to like figure out what are trends in developer conferences and stuff. We also care about what kind of developers are in attendance, like a lot of smart contract devs, a lot of, you know, front-end devs working on dApps. Are they interacting with their sponsors for like maybe swags or whatever? And we look at the theme. What is the theme of the developer conference going on? And what do developers care about here? What are the challenges in crypto DevRel? DevRel only existed in traditional tech environments, not in crypto until recently. I'm one of the prime examples here. But people, you know, developers found out that there's like, when you come to the crypto environment, there's a lot of politics. Like, developers care about writing code. They don't give a shit about, you know, what kind of politics are going on and stuff. But then, I mean, like one prime example is Prague POW, highly controversial. And a certain somebody was uninvited from this conference. DevRel as well, you have to deal with market prices and tribalism when you're advocating. Like if I go to people, let's say in Ethereum or maybe in Tron and kind of advocate, hey, we have this really cool open source developer tool. They'll be like, oh, how heavy are your bags? Which is not everyone, but like it is a challenge because people might think you're trying to tie it to a price when you're just trying to do open source development work. And there's a lot of conflicts in the ecosystem that developers are facing and have to deal with. One of them was like, especially when it comes to product stakeholders. Like for a lot of developers, you know, you had to like, you know, it was a shock, like the DAO fork. Because it was something that was like, you know, it's technical, but it's like split the networks and stuff, and here we are. So now that we talked about what DevRel is, we're talking now about how do we improve the developer ecosystem in Ethereum Classic and what we've been doing for the past year. The areas of focus for the ETC cooperative this year has been 4 categories: data science, developer operations or DevOps, dApps or, you know, decentralized application, IoT, Internet of Things. I'm going to go over each 4 of them and what we did. All right, my favorite project, one of my favorite projects is the Google BigQuery one for data science. What I love about this project, it costs the cooperative $0 and a lot of marketing benefit from it and a lot of technical implementation. It came about when me and Anthony decided that we want to quantify decentralization in ETC from a wealth distribution point of view, which is the Gini coefficient. Now, what I realized when I implement that project was there's no easy way to parse ETC data in order to analyze it and get that metric. So the data engineering problem was much higher than the data analysis problem. We found the Google BigQuery implementation of Ethereum, and we got in touch with Google, and we collaborated with them to get ETC as an open source data set that updated every 24 hours in order for data scientists to quantify and run all their queries and analysis on Google BigQuery for ETC. In continuation, just to give you like a few ideas of what happened after, ETC dataset is the second most referenced dataset in crypto right after Bitcoin on Kaggle. What that means is like we're the second most popular crypto dataset. We provided a lot of example charts and analysis and queries that are being referenced by a lot of data scientists on Kaggle, and for us that's a win. Now why did that happen? Simple. We provided a lot of documentation, a lot of code, a lot of open source stuff, a lot of analytics to show you how to use Google BigQuery for ETC. And that for us is great marketing for Ethereum Classic as a serious development and data analysis platform. The second data analysis project we worked on was quantifying immutability. When we had Atlantis hard fork, a lot of developers had issues trying to explain what immutability and how does it get affected when you implement Atlantis. And developers really want to just focus on the code. So I set out to quantify immutability, did a lot of research on how do you visualize it to stakeholders. We have an article on it on Medium for Ethereum Classic. So, Google quantifying immutability if you want to check it out, just like deeper analytics. I'm in the process right now trying to submit it to journals, try to get it peer reviewed. So it's like another example of the cooperative trying to submit original research into blockchain that is, never existed before. Nobody ever tried to quantify immutability before. So what are the future plans for data analysis? We want to focus more on research, decentralization, and chain reorgs topics. We want to submit more original research there. We want to do machine learning models like what Cody was talking about, maybe like implement something with ETC, with ML. We also want to do graphical mapping of the entire ETC network with analysis. Like, for example, maybe look at the DAO fork during that time and do graphical analysis. 51% attack would be really interesting. Also, node analytics. We want to try to map out all the nodes by IP address and graphically, and try to see, like, geographically, where all the ETC nodes are. Now, the most important project, in my opinion, which I've been working on, my little baby, Ether cluster. It's like under the category of DevOps. So to understand why the Ether cluster is really important, you have to look at Impura. Impura is considered, according to consensus, the secret weapon of Ethereum. They're like the Goliath. Every Ethereum service connects to Impura. Well, consider me David. I threw a rock at Impura. And we provided Ether cluster as an alternative. Ether cluster works just like Impura, but it provides support for Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. And it's scalable, it's open source, and it's designed not to be centralized. Because by open sourcing it and not relying on one cloud provider, you can deploy on multiple different cloud providers, which is much better than what Impura is working on. Let's see. So to give you an idea of project using Ether cluster, you have Jade Explorer by Zane and Shane, Zach. MetaMask, I demoed it working with Ether cluster endpoint. We got Second State, one of our sponsors. They have the BUIDL IDE, which uses Ether cluster. Two Impura competitors came up to me after we released Ether cluster to tell me that they're going to reference our open source design to compete better with Impura, which is, for me, that's the win. Like, if you find it valuable, use it. We have a lot of DevOps and DApp developers that are, engineers that are interested in, adding more tools and like better support for Ether cluster. The other one that we collaborated on with Afri and Project Gorley at the same time with White Block team was the Nazgul project testnet, which is like Afri was talking about, like a stress testing Atlantis compatible hard fork testnet at ETH Berlin for ETC. It's probably going to be used for future testing ground for multi-client hard fork and consensus testing. It's going to be useful when you have Agartha coming up later and other upcoming hard forks to make sure there's no consensus breaking changes. For dApps and smart contracts approach, we provided a lot of guides for deploying and writing your smart contract to ETC. We also demoed how to run Kadi testnet and deploy to it. And now you can use the latest Solidity version with ETC, as we demoed in one of our guides. Future plan for dApps on ETC under the cooperative. We want to work with decentralized oracles, like maybe dApps that are using Chainlink. We want to focus on mixers and anonymity using dApps. Maybe a fun social dApp like the token coin registry, the DCR. And maybe want to add DAOs for fun experiments, like maybe a DAO for Donald McIntyre. So the idea here is like the more we try to collaborate on open source tools with other services, the more you have access to third-party developers and people can understand that ETC is a serious platform for development. IoT, this is supposed to be a GIF, but like, I guess not being played right here. We built a guide for Raspberry Pi running on ETC for IoT. The future plan that I want to work on is a robotic project that would write to the ETC network. Now, my background has been in robotics before I started software. I would love to build some sort of robot project that would just like, write whatever to the ETC network. Examples of cross projects. Project Gorley Kadi, which we funded originally at the cooperative, now runs on Ether cluster. We also, the Peace Bridge uses Ether cluster and Kali testnet. Now, why do we care about all that? Because we try to find like different projects that we work on that can or fund that can actually, benefit from one another. And that's like a good, signal for us. Hyperledger Besu, when it's, finalized for ETC, will be running it on Ether cluster. Like, what is the outlook in summary for the future cooperative project? We want to improve Ether cluster, add more features. We want to build more dApps. Another idea I had is like maybe build a reference dApp for cybersecurity, like make it very exploitable in order to improve dApp security online. We want to do more data analysis and research and robotics and machine learning with ETC. For community and developer outreach, we're going to go over what we did from that end this year. So we attended 2 hackathons. When I mean attended, not like show up, like I actually sat down and coded with people. 2 East Berlin and at Con in Sydney. What I realized was that there's a better reception among developers to ETC once they realize that, from a technical point of view, ETC is like the same as ETH1X. The other conferences we attended, sponsored or spoken at. I mean, Anthony and I, we were at a panel at the Atlanta Blockchain Conference. East Berlin, I gave a talk about quantifying immutability, and I was a judge at the hackathon at East Berlin. East Denver, Bob was there to give a talk. At Con Sydney, I gave a talk. The ETC meetup in Xiamen, China, with ETC, in collaboration with ETC Labs, I gave a talk over there. And then I gave a little, like a tutorial on how to deploy your smart contract to ETC in San Fran with ETC Labs. So the future of that is we want to give more conference talks, obviously, about ETC development all over. We want to sponsor more hackathons. We want to hack with other devs at hackathons on ETC projects, and we want to do more meetups. So in summary, we at the cooperative, we had a good year, successful DevRel project and outreach. There's more development, new dApps, cutting-edge projects. We want to do more infra, improve Ether cluster, and more community outreach with sponsorship and talks. Thank you. If you ever want to reach out to me, here's how you can find me. I'm available. More than happy to get any of your questions later or anything. Thank you.
You can wear that. Put that around your shoulders. There you go.
Oh, Canada. All right. Anyone got any questions? What up, Anthony?
What's your ideal DevRel project? Like, if you had no limits, what would be your favorite projects to do?
Like something like I want to actually I can build any robot project you think of. My problem is budget. Like, how much can I get away with? Like, I can get you a walking clone of Anthony robot, who's connected to the ETC network. But seriously, I think robotic would be really interesting with ETC. But like, the problem is robotic project, hardware is really expensive. You need to pay a lot of money for hardware for prototyping and all that. But yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Zach. It's not working.
Just for the Ether cluster thing, like, how is that intended to be used? Would that be like if I'm a dApp developer and I want my users to point to that instead of Infura? Or is that something like as a user, I would go into maybe my like Nifty wallet or some sort of wallet software and point my wallet at my own cluster that I make myself?
Right. So Ether cluster right now as an endpoint, it is centralized. And the reason we have an endpoint to begin with is because we want to demo it. But Ether cluster, the main innovation is the design specs of open source DevOps scalable blockchain infrastructure that, Infura never open sourced their backend, right? So the idea is we're providing an endpoint for you, but if you find that it's not enough, like you have a lot of users, you need more of your own thing, we have the entire design spec for you to use on your own, for your own, dApp and stuff. And for wallets and stuff, running your own Ether cluster might be really, overkill, because by default you're running minimum 3 nodes, So
Right,
I think it's better just to
use my local. I just
you just run it locally, right?
Rather than deploying a bunch of nodes. Okay.
Yeah, but locally you just run one node locally. But Ether cluster is more designed if you have a lot of traffic and stuff, and it's designed in a way that'll be cheaper than probably using Infura. At the same time, I know Infura uses AWS. We have Google Cloud, but we're opening it for AWS. So a decentralized component would be having multiple cloud providers running Ether clusters. So if one data center breaks down or something, at least you have Google Cloud and AWS running and stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I mean, something I'm thinking just popped into my head that could be a use case is if in the not too distant future we get Bezu running within Ether cluster, whether that's in ETC or in F mode, what you could actually do is, if you're a business who wants to have a private or consortium chain within their own data centers, you could run that completely behind firewalls and so on. Really what you're providing there, I guess, it's a bit like sort of an OpenStack kind of scenario of saying, well, hey, you want to run a cluster of machines, here's the answer.
Even for testing, let's say I want to the chain safe product, and I forgot the name, but
Nazgul? Nazgul?
No, what was the...
Did batch
transactions?
transactions?
The testing, an enemy, right. For example, an enemy, we can easily deploy something like that on Ether cluster and maybe have it for multiple clients. So if you have an upcoming hard fork, we would have it on Ether cluster, 3 different clients communicating together and try to, jack up all the transactions to the point to see if you can break it and if there's any consensus breaking problem.
I mean, I think the problem that Infura have is, how on earth do they get anyone to pay for Infura ever? It's basically being provided as a free service and is just scaled up to astronomical levels because people are obviously going to use it because it's free. Who would not want that? Mm-hmm. But then how on earth do you turn that into a business that people will pay for? So, I mean, I think what we have here with Ether cluster is, yes, we can run some convenience bits, but, we're never going to scale that to Infura's size, both because it would be a stupid waste of money for us and because it encourages that centralization. Mm-hmm. But what we can provide is saying, if you have a need for more, for more coverage, here you go, run the machines yourself. That really that needs to be a built-in part of a business model. If somebody is building things on top of a public chain, well, where are your nodes coming from? That has to be an intrinsic part of your calculations. And if you don't have an answer for that, other than free riding off Infura, you don't have a business.
That's true. And I think Infura's main weakness, they're only committed to one chain. So by that definition, it's tough for them to monetize anything, right? And Ether cluster, now we have support for Ethereum. And so that's one other reason we're better than Infura.
Can we do an expanse chain?
Sure. I mean,
an Ethereum social chain, a music coin cluster.
We can do anything.
There we go.
All right.
We love all the Ethereums.
We love all of them. All right. Anybody has any more questions? No. Okay. I don't know if you need
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, that's okay.